I hate to be one of those people, but man, Hollywood is really out of some ideas, huh? Like, here's a list of some franchises with sequels or spin offs planned for 2026. There's The Devil Wears Prada, Silent Hill, Scream, Mortal Kombat, Star Wars, Scary Movie, The Avengers. You guys get the point. I'm not even gonna name off the rest of the list. Why is it so hard to go to a theater and watch an original movie? Hell, even my favorite movie from this year, Project Hail Mary, was based off a book. But at least we have the 2026 World Cup, right?
Mexico. Mexico with South Africa in the...
Termina con A.
South Africa.
Ahí está.
June 11th, Mexico City, Mexico, South Africa. Huge game.
Ahí está la inauguración del Mundial.
It's a coincidence. It's not like both games were the opening match of the World Cup. Oh, well, the game can't possibly be on the 16th anniversary of that matchup. At least Mexico has a new manager, right? My God. The script writers were really in their bag when finding the 2026 World Cup for Mexico. Not only did we get a redo of the 2010 opening matchup against South Africa 16 years later, but Mexico's second match against South Korea, which is the exact same matchup as their second game in the 2010 World Cup. And who can forget the iconic 1962 matchup between Mexico and Czechoslovakia, which I didn't know existed until I looked it up. And while I know it's an entirely new country, Czechia is facing Mexico in the third match of this group stage. And take this as your reminder. The world you grew up with still exists, and companies will stop at nothing to nostalgia bait you. Hell, even this jersey I'm wearing is a fucking nostalgia bait of the 1998 World Cup Mexico jersey. So, it fucking works. This video will focus more on the South Africa 2010 World Cup matchup. And like these movie companies, I have also mastered the art of sequel baiting. And the Korea game will be the focus of a different video. I don't know if that's coming out before this World Cup. I'm filming this 2 weeks before the World Cup even starts. I haven't written the Korea game yet. I haven't watched that shit since 2018. And I don't believe the footage of the 1962 World Cup match exists. Oh my God. I'm gonna make a video on a match from 1962, even though it's a different country, since the Czech Republic and Slovakia split up. I think I might be in my bag, boys. Honestly, the 2010 World Cup is one of the most decisive World Cups ever. To some, it was a mid World Cup, alright. To others, it was the worst. And to people like me, it was probably peak. From the Jambalani to the Vuvuzuela to Shakira, Forlan's bangers and that Iniesta goal. It's peak to me. This shit means something to me. And it's solely not because it was the summer before high school for me. So I'm just nostalgic about the time before I realized calculus even existed. Let's start this story off from qualification. Mexico's road to the 2010 World Cup started off rough. Led by the late Sven-Goran Eriksson, Mexico had a very slow start, finishing second in their third round group and ending the round going 3 games without a win. They lost 1-0 to Jamaica at Kingston, drew 2-2 in Canada at Edmonton, and lost 1-0 away to Honduras at San Pedro Sula. At this point, it was obvious Eriksson was on the hot seat due to being at risk of not qualifying. This is the perfect time to introduce you to the truths of Mexican soccer. Well, from around this time, a lot of these ended in the 2010s, some ended in 2022, some are still true now, but you get the point. The first truth I'm going to speak about today is not the number one truth, but it's the first truth. Mexico always qualifies to the World Cup, especially after 1990. The second truth, prior to 2022, they always lose in the round of 16. Mexico has not missed the World Cup since being banned in 1990, and that time period, they've been chasing that mythical quinto partido, as they always found ways to lose in the round of 16. Not qualifying for the tournament would be enough to be named public enemy number 1. Getting eliminated before the final round would just be so embarrassing, you would be banned from even managing a soccer team ever again. From there, we move on to the Hex, CONCACAF's final stage of qualifying, where the final 16s were put in the group. The top 3 finishers qualify directly to the World Cup, while the 4th place team gets put in the playoffs with the 5th place finisher from the Golden Bowl qualifiers to see who moves on. The first game for Mexico was against their arch rivals, the US, at Columbus Crew Stadium. This is a perfect time to introduce you to the next truth of Mexican soccer. The US always wins at Columbus Crew Stadium 2-0. Or as they call it, 2-0. While the table is looking like this after one game, Mexico goes to Mexico City to face Costa Rica in their fortress, Estadio Azteca. This time for the 4th, and this is actually the biggest truth of Mexican soccer. Mexico does not lose at Estadio Azteca. Since the opening of the stadium in 1966, Mexico has only lost at the stadium 2 times during qualifiers. One of them happening in 2001 and the other in 2013 to Costa Rica and Honduras respectively. So at the time of this qualifying round in 2009, Mexico only had 1 loss at Estadio Azteca. Mexico is able to get a 2-0 win there, which puts them second in the qualifying. The next game, Mexico would travel to San Pedro Sula and get humiliated 3-1. And with that loss, Mexico is sent down to 4th place and Erickson gets fired. You see, Mexico was always 1 step ahead when it came to their sequel game, as El Vasco had managed Mexico in the 2002 World Cup. A year prior, he took over a struggling Mexico who were at risk of not qualifying for the World Cup and had just lost 3-1 to Honduras in San Pedro Sula. He came in and saved Mexico, leading them to finish second in qualifying. At the World Cup, Mexico found a way to finish first in their group, and they ended up getting humiliated 2-0 against the US. Back in 2009, El Vasco had rejoined Mexico after some time at Atletico Madrid and some other Spanish teams, with the same goal he had 8 years earlier: save Mexico in qualifying and get them to that quinto partido. Side note, don't you hate when the sequel is so lazy? Like, they just reused the exact same plot. Anyway, his first game would be against El Salvador and San Salvador, and they would end up losing 2-1, dropping Mexico to 5th place. After that, Mexico would go on a run, winning 5 games in a row and drawing the last game. This would be enough to earn them second in their group. Yeah, because, this is a sequel, babe. As Mexico stumbled a bit during qualifiers, South Africa got an automatic bid to the tournament on the basis of being the host country. Going into this World Cup, South Africa's form was pretty solid. They've been unbeaten in all of 2010, which includes wins against Colombia, Guatemala, and Denmark in the 3 games before the tournament kicked off. South Africa's coach was Carlos Alberto Parreira, an experienced manager who managed at 6 World Cups with 5 different teams and actually won the '94 World Cup in Brazil. Mexico, on the other hand, did lose 2 of their last 4 games before the tournament, suffering 3-1 and 2-1 defeats to England and the Netherlands respectively, but went on in the tournament with a 5-1 win against Gambia and a 2-1 win against the defending champions, Italy. There were some controversies for the squad selections for both countries. For South Africa, there was a belief that some informed players were left out, as Parreira went on with a more experienced roster that may not have been in the best form. While doing some research about this, I found a Bleacher Report article that talks about South Africa's all-time goal scorer, Benny McCarthy, who played for the English side West Ham United, and how he was omitted from the squad. The reason given was fitness, as McCarthy was given a lot of criticism for being overweight, and he was dealing with an injury that prevented him from playing the warm-up games prior to the tournament. Before I get into Mexico's roster controversies, if it feels like I just kind of blew by South Africa and then focusing on Mexico, it is because I could only find so much on that. And 2, Mexico and controversy go hand in hand. And 3, I'm a fan of Mexico. I was alive during this time. I remember some of these controversies like it was yesterday. For Mexico, there was a bunch of controversy. For starters, El Vasco left Barcelona B midfielder Jonathan Dos Santos off the final roster, being one of the final cuts made by Aguirre, as he preferred to take an aging Bofo Bautista over the 20-year-old midfielder. The blowback was so insane that Zezinho, a former pro soccer player in his own right, as well as father of Jonathan Dos Santos, went full scorched earth. He accused the Mexican Federation of being corrupt cronies that made backdoor deals, which honestly isn't wrong. However, Zezinho went from being what many consider to be someone yelling the cold truth of the federation to someone throwing a tantrum, as he claimed that his older son, Giovanni Dos Santos, who made the World Cup squad and was an undisputed starter for Mexico, was so distraught that he might not play the World Cup. Then he went on to say that Jonah was never going to play for Mexico again and would keep his options open for Spain and Brazil, as Jonah was able to play for both of them since he hadn't played for Mexico in an official game. Then he said that Gio was never going to play for a trash team like Mexico again, and that all ties between El Tri and the Dos Santos brothers were cut. God damn, this sounds like something that would be in Club de Cuervos. The second controversial pick, as I mentioned a little earlier, was El Bofo Bautista being picked. It goes hand in hand with Jonah, but I really want to make it clear just how insane this Bofo pick was in 2010. I'm a Bofo truther. He's one of my favorite players of all time. He's one of my GOATs. He had no reason to be picked in that 2010 World Cup squad. Yeah, he was having a solid season with Chivas, but yeah, he shouldn't have been picked. He was way past it. The third pick, which might actually be the craziest after what happens, was Oscar El Conejo Perez. The then 37-year-old was picked as the expected third-string keeper. He was expected to be backups to Memo Ochoa and Luis Ernesto Michel, and he was picked over the likes of Jonathan Orozco and Jesus Corona, though Corona had some off-field issues, and mainly assaulting a man in Guadalajara. Now, I don't really think about that this was a crazy call-up that was controversial, but it's kind of crazy how much time he actually played and how the fact that he started in an important game, especially in hindsight. But 37-year-old Cuauhtemoc Blanco being picked while playing for Veracruz in Mexico's second division. I'll be first to admit, class is never truly gone, and the fact that he did start 2 games and did decent enough is insane considering how over the hill he was. He was washed. But he scored against France, even though it was a penalty, right? So it's okay. Now, I will give Vasco credit for not calling up more old dinosaurs. In fact, 10 of the 23 players called up were under the age of 25, ushering in a new golden generation. Another thing I want to know is that would be relevant later in the next video, maybe, because I am splitting this into 2 videos. Chivas was in the middle of a great tournament. So why is this important? Because, again, this will go on later. I'll probably cut this out. Mexico has a habit of calling up Liga MX-based players months before the World Cup starts. Like 1 or 2 months before, in the middle of the season, they take them. They do this training camp as an excuse to get the players mentally and physically focused on the game, get them working as a team. It's to do commercials. They mainly do commercials, I think. No one knows what the fuck they do. The 6 people in there, I'm sure there's tactical stuff. But Mexico has been doing this since 98, I think, and we haven't seen any actually specific thing where this is why we're going to these training camps, because we're about to make it to the semis or the quarters. No, that's not a thing. Oh, back to my main point. Mexico has the tendency of taking their Liga MX-based players early for a training camp. Chivas, playing with only Mexicans, have the tendency of having some pretty good Mexican players, especially during World Cup years. In 2010, they lost 5 starters to the World Cup. In 2026, they lost 5 starters for the World Cup. I'll talk more about the 2026 version of this later. Let's talk about some key players from Mexico in 2010. The first player I want to highlight is someone I mentioned earlier, Tottenham attacker Giovanni Dos Santos. The 21-year-old was expected to be the heir to Cuauhtemoc, but he was going through a rough patch career-wise, to say the least. He started off his career at Barcelona, making his debut at the age of 18 and making 28 appearances for the club. He ended the season with 4 goals, 3 of which coming from a hat-trick in his last appearance for the club. After that, he would make a move to Tottenham Hotspur, where he had a rough start, only making 12 appearances and having 1 goal. He would move to championship side Ipswich Town for the last few months of the season. When he returned to Tottenham, his discipline was called into question by manager Henry Redknapp, who claimed that Gio loved nightclubs. Loved him. Let me post a montage of how many drunk pictures he has. He would only make 3 appearances for Tottenham this season before moving on loan to Turkish giant Galatasaray in January. There, he would make 18 appearances but would fail to get on the score sheet. But he did have 3 assists. Gio isn't someone who only helps his team through scoring though. His greatest attribute is his dribbling, and he's able to creatively create for others. Another key player for Mexico would be his partner on the opposite wing, Carlos Vela. He, along with Gio, were considered Mexico's future, and each had the world at their feet, from all the pressure and expectations that came with it. Unlike Gio, he was having success in his club career, having 29 and 22 appearances for English club Arsenal in the 2 seasons leading up to the World Cup. Though he was struggling scoring goals and getting actual playtime, like Gio, he was a creative player with flair, and this tournament was expected to be their coming out party. The third and final player I'm mentioning for this part is Mexican legend Rafael Marquez. The Barcelona center back is one of the best players to ever wear a Mexico jersey and had been captaining at 3 since the 2002 World Cup. The defender is expected to be the leader of the back line and the team, but he's not only a defender. He's technical and good on the ball and can play big minutes at defensive mid. There's not much I could say, but the montage and the fact that after leaving Barca in July of 2010, he was the most capped non-European player and the 8th most capped foreigner during a period where Barca was winning everything is insane. The game took place on the 11th of June 2010 at the beautiful soccer city in Johannesburg, South Africa. The Bafana lined up in a 4-4-1-1 with Gune in between the posts. The back line is made of Subernosio Gaxcla, Aaron Mokoena, Gumalo, and Lucas Thuala. On the wings, you have Modise and Shabalala, with the midfield comprised of Letshoyoyane and Dikako. Up top, you have the duo of Pinar and Mfela. Mexico lined up in a 4-3-3. El Conejo Perez ended up being the starting goalkeeper over Ochoa and Michel. Paul Aguilar, Ricardo Osorio, El Maza Rodriguez, and Carlos Salcido will make up the back line. Rafa Marquez will be the defensive mid, with Efrain Juarez and the captain Gerardo Torrado as the other 2 center mids. The attack had Gio dos Santos and Carlos Vela on the wings, with El Guille Franco up top. I'm going to state this now. I am not the biggest fan of Vasco. In fact, I might even be considered a hater of that old fuck. He ruined a great chance at reaching the mythical Quinto Partido, and his roster choices in the World Cup were questionable to say the least. And you heard that correctly. El Conejo Perez, the man considered to be the 3rd goalkeeper, was the starter for Mexico, not only in the opening game for the whole World Cup. Perez hadn't been a consistent national teamer since the 2002 World Cup, only playing in 6 games between the 2 Vasco tenures. And even then, he only played in the first 2 appearances under Vasco and did not get caught up until May of 2010. He appeared in the 3 World Cup warm-up matches before being named starter over the consensus starting goalkeeper at the time, a 24-year-old Memo Ochoa. At that time, I remember being just bewildered at that decision, and that's coming from a Chivas fan. I pledge my allegiance to my keeper, the replacement of San Osvaldo himself, Luis Ernesto Michel. But even then, I couldn't see a world where Memo was not the real starter. And yet here we are with a 5'7" goalkeeper who was way past his prime. In hindsight, starting El Guille Franco is another controversial pick for the starting 11. The then 33-year-old striker had been released by West Ham United before the World Cup after a disappointing season with the Hammers. He scored only 5 goals in 23 appearances. He wasn't in his best form, and to make matters worse, on the bench, Mexico had a young, hungry striker that had just exploded on the scene, scoring goal after goal for Chivas. Mexico's now top goal scorer, El Chicharito Hernandez, who before the tournament had just signed with Manchester United after scoring 10 goals in 11 games. Going into the match, South Africa were the clear underdogs. They would be ranked 83rd going into this World Cup, but they did have the benefit of playing at home. Mexico, on the other hand, go into this World Cup as the 17th ranked team. Once kickoff happens, Mexico gets in the groove early, keeping possession of the ball, and they quickly create the first chance of the game after a nice play from right back by Aguilar, who sends a dangerous cross that finds Gio, but the ball deflects off a defender. Let's go to the board real quick. Even though Rafa Marquez was listed as a DM, Marquez would drop into the back line while Mexico had possession, allowing both Paul Aguilar and Salcido to push up high and add width to Mexico's attack. This would become key for Mexico as this move would allow them to outnumber the South Africans in attack and lead to more chances being created. In the 18th minute, Gio had a beautiful run, but he missed horribly. In the 32nd minute, Vela plays a beautiful lofted ball to El Guille, who is one-on-one with the keeper, but Gun is able to get his arm to it and prevent what could have been a beautiful play.
In the 37th minute, Gerardo Delgado plays a corner kick which is flicked onto a wide open Carlos Vela, who scores it for the first goal of the game. However, the linesman flag is raised up, signaling an offside. Looking at the replay, we could see that Vela is in fact offside as the goalie dove off his line, leaving only one defender between Vela and the goal line.
In the 40th minute, there was another chance for Mexico, but Guille misses again, which has become the story of the first half, as he had his chances, but he hasn't been able to convert. Once the 41st minute hits, South Africa gets control of the game, creating a few chances off corners and dominating possession for a bit until the half ends, showing us just how dangerous South Africa can be, especially on the counter. The second half starts off with a big chance for South Africa in the 48th minute as a cross from the left wing is barely cleared by Salcido. In the 53rd minute, off a beautiful ball, Shabalala outruns Osorio, leading to a one-on-one with El Conejo. He's at a tough angle, but the South African shoots it cross-body to the far post and scores a banger. Mexico, who has been having more possession, now finds himself in a hard spot, having to build a comeback in hostile territory against a team that has found their groove. And in the 78th minute, Guardado finds a cross to the far post that finds Rafa Marquez alone with two other Mexican players behind him. He shoots it, equalizing the game for Mexico. But the game isn't over, as in the 89th minute, a long ball finds Mefela, who outruns both Massa and Salcido, but through divine intervention, the ball hits the post. Thankfully for Mexico fans, the ref does blow the whistle shortly after, ending the first game of the 2010 World Cup in a draw. I had planned to make the 2010 and 2026 part of this video all one video, but this gone for way too long. Or maybe I too have mastered the art of sequel baiting. But join me next time where I talk about the 2026 World Cup and the weird similarities it has to 2010 and actually other prior World Cups, I think.